After I posted my first week of school vlog last week, I got some questions about taking notes on my iPad. So my iPad has been charging, and I figured that today we would talk about how I have used my iPad to take notes for years now. So I have been using Notability on my iPad since college, probably about going on 5 years now. So I've been doing this a while, and I figured I would show you 3 different ways that I have used Notability to take notes during class, depending on the kind of class and also sort of what program I was in and things like that. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, so I got my iPad Pro many years ago when I was still in college. So I believe this is a second generation iPad Pro, and it's like 10.5 inches, something like that. And then I also have whatever version of the Apple Pencil was out at the same time. And I like magnets here and all that kind of stuff. So let's get started. So I mostly use my iPad for school, and I mostly use my Notability app. So let's talk about how I use the Notability app to organize my class notes and my work. So I'll start by showing you how I use it now, and then I'll go through some other examples that I've used throughout my MPH as well as in undergrad. So let's look at how first Notability is structured. So you can organize your notes into different folders and subjects and things like that. So I have these big folders for sort of archived notes. So these are a couple archived notes from when I was an undergrad and all of my archived notes from when I was in my MPH program. And then whatever classes I'm in at the moment, I will make a divider for them and put them in just like this open area. And so we're looking at my Foundations of Bioethics class, and let's look at this Intro to Bioethics note. So my classes are separated into, the work for my classes at least, is separated into 3 chunks. So I have my pre-work, I have my live session, and I have my post-work. And so I keep all of the work for one class in one document, because especially for my pre-work readings, I will go through and I will either take notes by hand using the pencil, or I'll type them out on my computer. Notability is great because it has a cloud system, so you can access the same note on your laptop, on your iPad, or even on your phone if you're like on the go and wanting to review something. So I will either take notes by hand or typed on the laptop. This note is a great example of that because I did one for one reading and the other for the other reading. So obviously these arrows and things like this, I couldn't really structure my note like that if I was typing it out. So those you kind of have to do by hand using the pencil. And it's super great to, here I'm kind of showing like a little bit of a timeline and things like that. But otherwise, I can typically type out my notes just in normal bulleted form. And then during the live session, I will take notes always on my iPad using my pencil, especially during this time of Zoom. It's super weird and just kind of awkward to be typing while you're also being like filmed. And so I find it definitely easier to do it this way where I have my Zoom up here and I'm watching and listening to class, and then I'm writing notes here. And you'll see that I have some color coding systems going on. So this differs depending on the class and sort of what fits whatever I'm doing for that class, in that moment, for that year, etc. So I've just been taking my lecture notes in black. So this is basically, the black is like what the professor has said, and the teal is like my thoughts, and these are typically for breakout rooms. So if I'm in a breakout room with something, I'll take it in a different color just so that when I'm going back and reviewing later, I know basically what was my thought versus what was the professor's thought. And I have a little to-do list item for myself down here in red. So that's kind of a good example to show that there are tons of different colors you can use for writing. You can use the same colors for highlighting, for actual typing text, and you can adjust the size and the trailing of the writing as well. So you can do all kinds of fun stuff with that. I typically, let's see, we'll do a little note in purple. I typically also use this little function down here, which is super neat and allows you basically, you can see this little tiny box here, and it allows you to move this box wherever you want. And then in where this shows up, if you write a little note here, it will put it where that little box is. And it also kind of, you see it moves along with you. And it's super helpful, so you don't have to keep like moving this forward to write where you want to. You can just be like, write a little note here, and it just will move it for you, which is super cool. And then you obviously have an erase function, and you can draw all kinds of stuff. You don't have to use the little zoom in function. And the eraser can do a partial erase. So if I just want to erase this little corner of this heart, I can do that. Or if I want to erase the entire line, I can do that as well. And then the other neat thing is this little scissor function up here will let you basically circle something and you can move it wherever you want. So let's say you are kind of like getting caught up with what a professor's saying and you just need to kind of like get everything down on paper really quick. You can do that, and then you can move it where it actually makes sense later. And I'm just gonna undo that and put that back where it belongs. And so that is pretty much how I use Notability for a lecture that doesn't have slides. So our lectures typically don't really have slides. We definitely don't get sent our slides beforehand, and it's mostly just like a lecture discussion type component. So this is kind of what that looks like. Now I can show you an example for, let's say when I was in my MPH program, and this is an example of some history slides, and our professor also didn't really use very word heavy slides. As you can see, it's a lot of pictures and things. Since it was a history class, he basically would just tell us, the stories of what was happening. And so I have these little picture slides that he had given us, and then I would import them before class, and you can have the entire slide deck. And then I was able to just very easily take notes right on top of the slides. And you don't have to keep zooming in and out because of this little function that I showed you before. You can be looking at the entire slide and typing wherever you want it. So if I wanted to write over Florida, I could. If I wanted to write up here, I could as well. So it was super helpful for that. And now let me show you an example of a more hard science type class. So I have my pathophysiology class here, and I was able to just take notes right on top of the slides. You can draw on top of them, things like that. So it really does depend on how the class is structured and how the lecture is structured and how the teacher sends out slides or doesn't. And the last thing that I want to talk about with Notability is this really cool function that if you have permission from your professor, you can record the audio as you are taking notes. And then if you go back and you look at something later and it's not really clear what you wrote, or maybe let's say you were taking notes and they said, A, B, and you missed the third thing, but there was something, you can just write a little line there. And then you can open up this recording and you can see that it kind of like grayed out this text a little bit, right? And so everything that I wrote while the audio recording was going gets grayed out when I open it up. And then if I play it back, I'm just going to scrub through to show you, and you can see that as I scrub through this audio, it sort of auto generates in time with the audio. And so it can show you what you wrote down as the professor said exactly what they said. So you can listen back and be like, oh, they said C, and fill it back in later. So that is honestly probably my favorite feature for Notability. And I used it so much, especially in undergrad when teachers would talk very, very fast and there was a lot of minute detail that you need to memorize and things like that. So super helpful. And I'll also show you one last organizational tip that I used for my undergrad notes. So these are more basic science classes, like I said. And so after going to the lecture, I would typically review the class afterwards. And so if I reviewed that class, I would then change the title of the note to include this little green check to tell myself not only does this lecture recording exist, but also I've done revision on it and I have reviewed it and I've either added notes to it or listened to the lecture for a second time, whatever it was that I felt I needed to do to succeed in that class. And so that is also super helpful for keeping yourself organized. And that is honestly pretty much it. That is how I use my iPad and Notability to take notes in class.
I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you guys have learned some new techniques for iPad note-taking. And if you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, all that stuff. You guys know the drill. Message me on Instagram if you have any questions or to tell me what you guys want to see in the next few weeks. And I will see you next week.
I just want me to find it, 'cause I'm not